Europe, the entire Europe is right now facing a difficult time when it comes to the tariffs that is putting in place. And back home, we have a situation whereby chapatis have become a very common topic with a million per day conversation still going on. And then we have the tour that the president made in the city. And then, if you can remember, over the weekend, the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga went to Kisii or Gusii land, a land that is considered to be his backyard and tough, and he was heckled. And when he came back to the rest of the country, he had something different to say. So to help us get a grip of how this is playing out, we have George Ngaire with me in the studio. Welcome, George.
Thank you very much for having me, Fred.
We're still expecting Joaquin Galitos to come. I'm hoping he's going to find his way here. I'm very sure he's not joined the president. The president cleared his tours yesterday.
Absolutely.
Yes. Very interesting things happening fast internationally.
Yes.
I mean, I'm seeing Trump making decisions that are leaving quite a number of people wondering what in the world is happening. He's implemented tariffs against Canada, against European, goods coming from the European Union. And the European Union has hit back, Canada has hit back, Mexico has hit back, China has hit back. He is unleashing tariffs on anyone and everyone, and the economists in this country are warning the country is going to go into recession.
Absolutely, but Fred, you have to look at it at extremely very many different ways. You could look at it from as an outsider. You might think that this is a completely absurd and an irrational president in as far as how he's decided to actually be able to engage some of their foreign countries that they have traded for a very long time. Canada is really an extension of the US to some extent, with the exception of the history that they've had, because it was all part of the British colony until when they were able to part ways. But when you look at it from the American point of view, the American taxpayer point of view, these are probably the best decisions they could ever make, because when you look at, particularly in terms of their foreign aid program, these were programs that were purely just taking money from them without them getting anything. And in some cases, in funds going to things that they can't even put one single benefit to the American people. When you say we're going to give $5–10 billion to Ukraine for some war mission somewhere with absolutely nothing to show of what we'll get out of it, and yet this money is not dug from somewhere, is actually picked from the American taxpayers to do that. So such decisions would be extremely popular to the American population, particularly the taxpayers and people living in the inner communities who are saying maybe this is the time this money should go into funding the inner communities and particularly in the minority communities, the black areas, Hispanic areas, which have traditionally been underfunded and completely subjected to poverty situation. When you look at the economic strength of those communities, they'll say we'd rather put these tens of billions of dollars into the ghettos and improve them than give our money to some foreign dictators and warlords. So maybe when you look at it from that angle, it might not be an irrational decision to the American taxpayer from how he sees it. But for those that have been benefiting for decades of these programs, now have a choice to make that probably America, maybe it's about time they can begin to start minding their own business. So President Trump, irrational for a long time, is not something that is very new. It's part of his persona. A rabble-rouser,
yes, he's a rabble-rouser.
For many.
He's one of those people who do what people don't expect him to do.
And Fred, when you look, a lot of people could say that maybe the outsiders, as I've already put it, could see it as something that might not be rational. But I can tell you, even for us Kenyans, when you look at the issue of immigration and our foreign policy, Fred, I would pursue, if I was to take that option, and indeed is one of the options that we are taking going into the next election, is that immigration and foreign relations have to be reviewed. We have to come to a point where, as a country, and particularly Kenya as a country, to begin to decide we want to relate with others on what terms. That's why former President Uhuru Kenyatta had attempted to make it clear that we are going to focus on economic development. diplomacy, and that we only want to focus on countries that are actually benefiting us. When you look at the burden that the Kenyan state has taken over the last 30 years, in as far as the affairs of other people, our neighbors and other countries are concerned, which is really none of our business, is that it's taken a tall order on our country to an extent that we are now the home to the largest refugee camp in the world. There is no country, including the great US of A, that has taken in 1 million refugees. They wouldn't even take 10K.
Yes.
Forget 1 million. Even now, they wouldn't even allow 10 people to cross. They are deporting. They are not willing to take.
And probably, if you look at the policies that are now being implemented,
Yes.
we're number one because of politics, or allegedly.
Yes.
Political analysts have said some of the policies that the current president, William Ruto, is implementing when it comes to immigration.
Yes.
First, by making it, stopping the vetting of people getting IDs along the borders. I know a lot of them are from the northeastern province, but at the same time you have guys from, you know, the Luya areas, bordering
the western region, the
western
border.
region.
Yeah.
And then now he's basically done away with the charge. I think it was 1,000 shillings for IDs. It looks good, but
the motive could be terrible. You know, Fred, for me, this president has made some serious blunders as far as national security is concerned. Fred, there is no country in the world that can be able to operate without a strong national security system. How you protect and defend your people. And that's why even the US is very big on that, and many other countries, they're very big on immigration. But this president has created a visa-free regime that allows everybody to land in Nairobi before he's vetted or even allowed to come in. That means you can just park from Iraq and show up at JKIA. And then he has opened up the borders to make it very open so that anybody can walk in from all walks of life, or whatever locations that are coming from, especially the northern and the western border, where majority of the people that are gaining access into our country, particularly the refugees, you know, the Rwandese, the Congolese, the Ugandans, and a few other Sudanese people that are coming in through the north. Most of them, you'll find them around the Kakuma region. And then the eastern part of the country, which is now where Garissa and Mandera and Tana and really Lamu as well, because it still borders Somalia in many ways, and so they're able to come in. So that's the third thing, that to allow to keep the open border. Now it worsens by saying that actually there will be no vetting. That means some character could just walk from Hagesia into Garissa and into Nairobi and do whatever he has. I think it's a tragic case, and this president seems not to be paying attention to what it means in as far as the handling of national security is concerned. And I think going into the next election, this should be a major conversation that we need to have. It should be immigration and national security.
You believe immigration should be one of the conversations?
Fred, this country has been a victim of terrorism for a very long time. Since when we had the 98 bomb blast, and the many other instances where we had criminals coming from Somalia walking into the country and walked into Westgate Mall in broad daylight, when everybody is seeing, gun down people casually. I'm sure you saw the videos, the CCTV, casually gunned down people and left. We've been victims of poor immigration handling of the immigration issue in this country. And I think going forward, because it has an effect on how our country is perceived. At some point, Fred, when we had those cases of, the very many cases of terrorist attacks here, our country was beginning to look like a very insecure place as a tourist destination. People would tell you, we're coming to Kenya, but are things okay? You understand? Because we are right next to Somalia. You can't even escape from that. You can't even say maybe that was a stray criminal that just happened to have passed through our country. We are right there with the country. So I think immigration is going to be a very big issue. Then secondly, Fred, on issue of foreign relations, is that this president then has even now allowed our country to sort of focus on President William Ruto, Uhuru Kenyatta then put it very well, that we want to get into the business of economics and not the business of wars. Meaning that Kenya has no business engaging in external war issues, whether be it in Ukraine, in Haiti or Sudan. It's unfortunate that they have such issues, but they should not be our personal problem. And neither should we see our public funds. I'm sure you've seen on one of the headlines that
it's almost
we are actually
5 billion.
5 billion shillings that we are spending on some country that does not economic, social, or political value into benefits to our country. You understand?
Yes.
What is the benefit of us associating with Haiti? It's absolutely not there. We have no trade relations. There's nothing that we are taking to Haiti, and there's nothing that we're actually getting in Haiti in form of aid or products. You understand? So I think those are issues that this president needs to look at, but it's very unfortunate that is doing it for politics. Yes.
So, and then he's been having a tour of the city.
Yes.
In the last 3 days. That has been somewhat controversial. I mean, some of the things that have been said, and then some of the things that have followed his tour have been rather disturbing. I don't know where it's just a bunch of thugs that are taking advantage of this, but the unfortunate thing, police are just watching.
You know, I had somebody yesterday give a very funny analogy to it. He was saying that when you see a preacher on a crusade tour, you'll always see his followers. That's so when you saw President Uhuru Kenyatta, it was not surprising to see President William Ruto, whom Honorable Raila Odinga and the Azimio group for a very long time during the campaigns kept on saying, "Mwizi ni nani?" And then the people would respond in their own way. And so it was funny seeing the president in Mathare and the parts of Huruma and those areas. And shortly after he left, there was a massive gang that was there robbing people. You'd even think he probably came with them to that particular area. But I think that was kind of a joke. But yes, President William Ruto is fully aware that he needs to build up his political base. He's working on a new political base that wasn't his, because Mathare, Huruma, those were largely opposition strongholds.
This is intentionally because of his bromance now.
Absolutely, he's fully aware, and it's the bait that he's working with, because he keeps saying, you know, we've decided with Honorable Raila Odinga that we want to unite the country. You know, he's talking to his base so that they can begin to embrace him to some extent. And I think our brothers from the lake have truly embraced him. And I think he wants to make that transition to the larger other segments of individuals that have supported Raila Odinga for a very long time. And I think in the process then, we are able he's able to build the kind of trajectory that he wants to build towards the 2027 election. As to whether that will succeed, that remains to be seen.
So basically, you can clearly see the game plan.
Absolutely.
Is get Raila's staff area, bring them into the bucket or basket, because he's lost over 4 million from central Kenya.
5 million even.
Over 5 million?
Yeah.
So he's lost from that. Do you see him creating a critical mass that can be able to bridge the gaps that have now appeared? Because now, obviously, some of the policies he's made is to try and get the Somali community on board. Hence the reason why I think that's the first place he started.
Absolutely. I think he's mapped out, Raila Odinga and ODM has enjoyed massive support, particularly in the north and in the south and western part of the countries, and also central. You know, Nairobi is central Kenya to some extent. Yes. So Nairobi and the lower eastern part, which still form part of central Kenya. And he's fully aware, President is fully aware that he needs that to be able to recover politically. Otherwise, it will be the biggest loss in the history of Kenyan politics. No other president would have lost an election first as a first time, as a one-term president, and also with the kind of margin that can easily, that he could easily lose with. So he has to work on it. And I think Nairobi provides him a better platform. Remember, President William Ruto is a rural politician. He's never been a city politician.
True.
And so there is no history of him winning anything in Nairobi. Of course, the exception of Nixon Korir winning in Langata, which was a stroke of luck. And it was fully backed by Mulima. Because it's the Mulima vote that actually propelled Nixon to become a member of parliament in Langata. When you look at the
matrix
of the Langata constituency, and so now that is gone, it's a pipe dream to even imagine he can win not even one seat. I've tried to look through the numbers and the dynamics of the 17 constituencies and which coalition has been getting what, and you realize ODM has been getting almost 2/3 of that vote, with the exception of areas like Dagoretti North, the Great South, sorry, and Roysambu and the Bakassi North, which pretty much border Kiambu and Westlands as well, a bit of that, because that's where a lot of the votes from Mlima have been coming from.
Yes.
And now that Mlima has eloped, it means there is no other constituency President William Ruto can realistically point and say, I can win this particular city, because there are only 5,000 Kalenjins in town. We've done the mathematics. There are not more than 5,000, so they can't even elect an MCA. And so President William Ruto is fully aware of that, and that's why he has to go over and above for the ODM base, which still remains a mirage, Fred, until when we go through an electoral process. You see, politics is a science. It's about numbers and how you convert that into numbers through what you call political engineering.
Yes.
And so he's in that process of doing that, and I think depending with how he does it, we are waiting to see.
Over the weekend, I think the former Prime Minister got a taste of something I don't think he had expected.
Yes.
Went to Kisii, and then normally in Kisii, he's hailed as a king.
Absolutely.
With a lot of praise and that kind of stuff. But he gets there, and he's heckled, and it's very interesting to check the age group of the people who are heckling him.
Very true.
Because these were young people.
Mostly.
He must have been shocked.
Fred, for the very first time, you know, the first group to exit, remember Kisii is in Nyanza.
Yes.
It's part of South Nyanza.
Yes.
And for the very first group to exit the ODM base from South Nyanza were the Kuria people.
Yes.
And Kuria East and Kuria West, and they voted for Jubilee in 2017, even the members of parliament, because of the local politics of the governorship at the county seats. And a lot of the communities, particularly those in the Kuria region, have always felt like the Luo community has been marginalizing them in their county affairs. So they moved out of that arrangement and now became the opposition from within. And repeatedly did that. Even today as we speak, both MPs are UDA MPs.
Yes.
And so for the very first time I had in another function this week, people saying the Kisii and Kuria region. I said, where is that region? You know, they've carved it. You know,
Kisii and
Kuria region. Yeah, there was a meeting here. I think must have been at Sereno or somewhere here, where the Kisii leaders were meeting.
Yes.
You know, across the board.
And the Kisii leaders were meeting with Kuria leaders.
They were saying they were discussing development. It was actually a development meeting. That's why even the cabinet minister for education was there. Yes. And he was even forced to do a disclaimer a day later that he was there as a local leader and not as a political ally to those who were anti-government in that particular function. And I'm saying it was the first time I was seeing in that function the branding, you know, the way you said the Mulima region.
Yes.
It means you've grouped a certain people.
The Kisii
and Kuria region. I said, man, it means then now there's another block of South Nyanza that has gone, leaving now, and with the debate of Matiang'i.
Yes.
As people were walking out of the stadium, and I was just listening to a friend of mine, he's called Dismas Moko, he's a political analyst, and with some other guys from the region, because he comes from there. And then it appeared like there's now a clear fallout between the Luos and the Kisii in that particular area, largely because of Matiang'i, leave alone even the relationship of Raila Odinga and William Ruto. But the fact that Matiang'i is now perceived as a candidate in the next election, and you know they've been propping Matiang'i for a very long time now as their candidate, you understand? And so Raila Odinga went to Kisii and sort of hinted that Matiang'i needs to work with others because they were pushing Matiang'i on his head.
Like
and
he's an
absolutely, and he said, you know, Matiang'i cannot be president with Kisii alone. So they were attempting to answer him, and the friend they answered in a very funny way. A guy said, we have no problem with Matiang'i. Let us even fall with him the way you've been falling. You know, wacha tuanguke naye vile umekuwa unaanguka. You understand? And we don't even want your vote. That the Luos, once they are done voting for Ruto, they are free to go and vote from 7. Fred, you know, it still goes back to what I've been saying about my dear old party ODM. Is that our trajectory has been down. And now we've even reached home. You know, Nyanza is a stronghold of Raila Odinga. And this is an area where he used to do a clean sweep from the north to South Nyanza, there on the border of Sirare, Isibania border there. Now the Kuria's left. Now you've got this Gusii region again leaving, which is Gusii and Nyamira.
Yes.
Combined is almost 1 million votes. Now what happens? It means Nyanza now remains with just 1 million vote. How much can 1 million vote do to turn around what President William Ruto has lost on the other side? It's a terrible situation. And I think Raila Odinga, I just saw here somebody saying, how long will Raila stay in this shaky marriage? The party stands to lose a lot, but probably him at a personal level is benefited a lot from this.
He probably have. If you look,
he's been sorted.
Yes, he's been sorted. If you look at the body language of Edwin Sifuna,
absolutely,
when they were presenting the documents,
yes,
as in you could clearly tell
he was not even planning to be there. You could imagine.
Yeah, this is a sheep that is being led to the slaughter, and he has made it clear.
True.
Even if our party supports William Ruto, I will not vote for him.
True.
He's made it so clear.
Yeah.
You just looked at him and he was a fish out of
And
water.
Fred, in that function, he even said it. I'm here in my capacity as and he kept on sort of insisting. He
Yes.
could tell people I know what his position is.
Yes.
And he kept saying, I'm here in my capacity as the SG of the party.
Yes.
So I want to execute my duties as the SG of the party. But sort of hinting that he has his own personal opinion.
Yes.
Fred, we are dealing with a very different time and different type of voters, not the kind that you can easily influence just via one platform. And so access of information is very wide. And so it's extremely difficult to imagine that the voter is not aware of what is happening. And I think Honorable Edwin Sifuna and majority of ODM MPs, you know, the only people who are excited about this business of a handshake between Honorable Raila Odinga and our brothers from the leg, and most of them are the ones who are very, very excited. Fred, Coast is part of ODM, has been part of ODM for a very long time. Which Coast MP have you seen talking about this handshake?
Yeah.
They are quiet. You go to the Western region, even Oparanya, he was at home. He's quiet. Because to go and sell directly this president on the ground is an extremely difficult task. And so I'm ashamed of it.
Let me pick this from you now that you mention Oparanya, because you come from that region. Selling William Ruto in Western Kenya is a difficult task.
It's an extreme.
I mean, if there's a community that has benefited from this government, it's Western Kenya.
Absolutely.
Yes. And still selling Ruto there is difficult.
Fred, you're forgetting that Western Kenya is the only region that has sent away 2 sitting deputy vice presidents while they're still serving. It tells you that positions don't really matter. That's a very easy bait, isn't it?
Yes.
If you have a vice president, you should be told, you know, we're in government, we can do all this.
Yes.
But it's a region where Deputy President Musalia Mudavadi was defeated by a local preacher who was working at Barclays Bank in Kisumu, a teller.
Yes.
A bank teller who resigned from his job and retired and went home to be a preacher called Akaranga.
Yes.
Campaigning on a small Toyota Corolla KAD, defeated a sitting deputy president.
Yes.
The same happened to Honorable Uncle Moody, you know, in Busia.
Yeah,
because President Kibaki had packaged him as the vice president, obviously, to the region. And he was a serving vice president. A local teacher, Otuoma, defeated him in Funyula. And you know, Moody is a billionaire. You cannot, he has a big name, big resources, but could not defeat.
He literally has everything
going for him. And experience. You know, he's a father figure in the community.
Yes.
But they still sent him home. So Fred is not a place where you come and say, you know, we've given you ministers, we've given you this. No. It's the most rational voting group in the country. They look at issues and can vote for individuals. You understand? That's why everybody has been collecting some votes in Western Kenya. There are parts of Kakamega and Malava which actually voted for President William Ruto on the ballot. Because we are saying this journey of Raila Odinga, it seems like we are not getting there. They were tired of losing. That's what they were saying in my village. That we are tired of, we've lost so many times. It's about time we try something different. And indeed, actually, they elected, voted for William Ruto in Malava. And even the current MP the one who just passed on, also won his seat despite being a Ruto ally. You understand? Yes. So that is a very tough place to be able to achieve that. That's what I'm saying.
And what are, if I was a Ruto chief campaigner, or I was in the inner circle of President William Ruto, some of the things that I'll be trying to establish is why am I a very hard sell in Western Kenya where I'm expecting to harvest a lot of votes so that I can sort that out now. What is making him unpopular?
Fred, a couple of things. One, it could be just a normal political propaganda. But Fred, the reality as well is that the expectations of Kenyan based on what he promised his people. It is much easier if he had implemented a lot of the things that he said. Fred, there was a very easy one. I've said it many times here that the biggest and most important issues now in the country is the economy and jobs. Fred, by 2027, the Kenyan population will hit at almost 60 million people. We are likely then to have 30 million adults in the country. Of the 30 million adults, 30 million adults that we're likely to have in the country, over 50% are what you're calling the youth, 15 to almost 35, maybe towards 40. And the majority of them are jobless. When you have 15 million jobless young people in the country who are roaming around, 15 million young people, Fred, they're the ones I've been seeing in one of these headlines, must be yours.
Yes.
Or it probably was yesterday.
Yes.
And
the ones going around.
And you could see it was blatant theft. They were not even pretending.
Yes.
It was open and public. That is what
robbery with violence
on live TV. That is what we are dealing with. You understand? And so for him, the first order of business would have been, how do you then address the issue of jobs? Fred, I've told you here, if you take 100 million shillings and put in the 290 constituencies today, it's just 29 billion shillings. You'll have done a factory in all the 290 constituencies. And you could even take it to the ward level, where you take 1,500 wards and put a factory in each of the wards, just 150 billion. You make it to be an industrialization fund, so that when your CS for Treasury does his budget and says the business of building the economy as a priority, the same way you put 600 billion shillings for education, you put 400 billion for national security, you put 300 billion for infrastructure, is where you also put 150 billion for industrialization, because job creation is the single most important social project, a social activity that you can engage in as a leader, because there's something to show that this is in Kangema, the village was dark, but today there's a new coffee factory here. Your brother or your cousins or your sisters can now walk to the factory and earn something. There's something to run on.
You can literally tell people this is
what I have done. So other people could bring other propagandas. You'll say, yes, it can be bad, it can be like this, but there's something to show for it, friend. But what is it that you can point that is major, that you can see that a local voter could vote for in the last 3 years? Fred, it's not there.
And you know, 2 years is a very short time.
It's a very short time.
For you to finish projects that make sense and have impact on the ground in 2 years. It's a difficult time. It's a difficult
Fred, this president had a very small task to do that I also thought the governor of Nairobi ought to have done.
He's such a let me just say this.
Fred.
And I'm sorry, Sakaja. I really voted for Sakaja. If there was a person who was so hopeful of what Sakaja could do, it's yours truly. He had told us he was going to divide the city into boroughs, and how, you know, the different boroughs were going to become, because I know how the UK is run. It's divided into boroughs.
Yes.
I don't know what he's doing,
Fred,
apart from chapati.
Fred, if you just look at law and order as a campaign theme, just law and order, before you even talk the billions we need to put you to do what and what, just to be able to take care of the issue of transport, matatus and hawkers, the issue of cleanliness just within the town.
And lighting.
And the issue of the road situation within, for example, even just the CBD, system, the drainage system. Fred, to do a decent low volume bitumen, now that the CBD is fully tarmacked, you just need about 50 million. That means if I take just per kilometer, just if I take 500 million, I would redo 10 kilometers within just the CBD. And that means we can expand the CBD even to Bunyala Road and these areas of that. You only need 3 months to 6 months. And there's something you can say, this place,
say, wow,
this, you know,
yes.
that's where usually it's like a human being, the first thing you see is the face.
Yes.
So the city is usually the first face you see of a country. Somebody arrives in Nairobi, drives through JKI and Expressway and is in CBD. There's nice roads, the lighting is good, the roads are marked, there are no potholes. You can say Nairobi is developed. Yes. Never mind, we have all these slums on the other areas.
You don't care even what.
Yeah, you
just
understand.
The first thing you see.
But when you see 500 meters from the office of the governor and you go to Haile Selassie Road and you find roads, people selling dirty food on the roads and the confusion that is there 3 years down the line, Fred, it means there's nothing else you can achieve. If you can't do the basics of just ensuring there's law and order within the county before even you go to do other issues. And so it goes to explain the reason why people have been saying age alone is not a quality for leadership. True. You can't just say I want to be a leader because I'm young. You should also be able to show what is it that you want to put on the table to be able to offer that. And I think
maybe if you were challenging Sakaja,
yes,
if Sakaja was here, he would tell you one of my legacy is the food program. Absolutely. Where I've been able to feed so many children in schools.
Yeah, Fred, as human beings and as individuals, as family people, we have challenges and they could be many, but there's what you call the priority things. You understand? And I think food is a good thing for the school, but there are many other important things that the city has been grappling with, particularly some of them are just an issue of law and order that could restore the face of the city before you put in a shilling in them. You understand? Yes. Because the Nairobi County already has what you call the county inspectorate, the city inspectorate, which is the team that ensures there's law and order within the counties. And we don't even need to do the boroughs because, Fred, we already have 85 ward administrators who are already paid and taken care of by the counties. You understand? Yes. And they all have the city inspectorate teams that are working with them. Yes. So I don't need to do a borough like the way it's in New York and in London as well, that to be able to show something. We just need proper structural plans. We need to do teams, great ward teams that are able to work on such a program, and the cleaning program will be decent, and the road maintenance program will be decent, and the law and order, you know, the parking slots for the parking, the bus stations and parks that we have around there will be in order. So I think Sakaja has spent a lot of time on something that is insignificant, even though it's a good thing, because and he's been able to. You can't show any physical change. He's attempting. Yeah. He's attempting to do it now, but Fred, 2 years is a very short time. It's almost like too late.
When you look at the city, it looks exactly the way it was before he became governor.
Absolutely.
Unless there are some spiritual structures he has done that we can't see with our physical eyes.
Fred, one day, I really thought President, you know, for me, when I look back at the last 4 presidents that I've been able to listen to, at least in person, I first saw Nyayo in Mombasa when I was a child. We used to go for the agricultural ASK show. Yes. And one time, we and my late uncle, may his soul rest in peace, Uncle Tom, we were there at the showgrounds, and we just happened to have gone through an exit where the president is actually coming in. It was just a coincidence. Yes. And President Moi came in a white suit, and you know, he saw me, and then he said, Kijan, I greeted him, and you know, I bragged for a very long time of having greeted the president back then. So President Moi, President Kibaki, and the other 2 presidents. I think President William Ruto has been the most articulate as far as the issues. I don't think there's any president who can explain where the country should be. But you see, in management, Fred, there's something called deviation, which is the margin, it's called a management, the execution gap, in management, which is the difference between the vision and what has been implemented. Yes. That we agreed you're going to do this, but you only did 80 or 60, so that 30% becomes the management gap that is there. Is that there's a huge deviation between what he says and what he's actually been able to implement, because devolution was a low-hanging fruit that you could have very easily worked on, because there are functions which are still in the national government. We still have staff and government buildings which are occupied that ought not to do that, and it would have helped him to be able to cut down the cost of running government, so that then he can be able to raise funds. Fred, we've been told a countless number of times that we are losing $1 billion a day, isn't it? Yes. Or actually, sometimes 2 billion a day. Yeah. That means you're losing 700 billion shillings every year on wastage and corruption in the national government. That was enough to be able to put half of it, 350 billion shillings, on infrastructure so that we can do roads. Remember, Fred, 300 billion shillings can do almost with an average of 50 million, because we're talking about rural development, so in the rural areas,
Yes.
where we do not need super highways.
Yes.
We just need nice, decent, low volume
Motorable
tarmac.
roads, yes.
Tarmac that you can do, which is 50 million.
Yes.
And so it means for every 1 billion shillings, you are able to do almost 20 kilometers. So if you talk about 300 billion, those are 6,000 kilometers worth of roads that you can do every year. If you just are able to secure 300 billion shillings of wastage.
Yes.
I'll not even talk about factories, because I've told you that you can put a little, you know, what you call light processing.
Yes.
You know, coffee picking and then processing and packaging, so that the kids in your village, or in my village where we do maize, have something to do, because they're going to a milling plant where they are working as packers and loaders and transporters. So 300 billion shillings, if it's rescued, you're able to do actually 2.
Yes.
Because if you do 100 million per ward is about 150 billion for basically industrialization. So 300 billion would mean we're doing 2 factories. Those are almost 3,000 factories. Can you imagine how big a campaign issue that would be for you?
That's amazing.
If you're able to just say, tell your cabinet secretary that you see CS Mbadi, what is the budget estimates that we have for next year is 4 trillion shillings. I want 10% of that to go to industrialization.
Yes.
So that you're able to sink in 400 billion on manufacturing. Fred, it will turn around. The debate would be different.
Yes.
Even with the hate and the propaganda, there will be something in every village that you go to
That
show.
people can show.
Eh,
We got this.
yeah,
doing
there's
this
now a
doing.
dairy processing plant here that was not here.
Yes.
And you don't need much, Fred.
Yeah.
It's just to to implement devolution as it was written on paper, because that would do away. I think you've seen they've given a notice of about 60-70 parastatus that they're doing away with.
Yes.
And they're saying that at least by the end of, they've been given notice of 6 months, most of the employees. I was with a friend of mine who works with Jomo Kenyatta Foundation. He's
Yes.
one of those agencies that have been scrapped off.
Yes.
So they are on a notice that up until I think June 30th, which is the end of this financial year, is when that institution will cease to
Will
exist.
cease to exist. And
Exist,
meaning they shall also lose their jobs, right?
If not losing, then some have been told they'll be redeployed to other areas. And they don't really need to lose their jobs, because we have a lot of government departments, Fred. The Department of Director of Public Prosecution, the Directorate of State Attorneys, which is where the Attorney General is. Most of those structures, the ESCC, do not have what you call the constituency-based structures, which is where they're supposed to operate from. And so they not only have a challenge with the physical infrastructure that is needed, which is the office and the equipments to use, but also the human infrastructure, which means staffing. So I'll give you an example. For example, the judiciary, which had an infrastructure budget of ensuring that at least, initially they were saying every county at least has a high court, but I've always been saying that we need to have at least a high court in every constituency.
Yes.
So, you know, a high court is just a classroom, friend.
Yeah, it's just
like a
just
classroom.
for you to deploy.
Yeah, it's just
a magistrate.
it's just like a classroom.
Yes.
So when you look at the average allocation for a classroom now for CDF is between 800,000 shillings and 1.2 million. So roughly a million
Yes.
could give you a decent class.
Yes.
And so you can imagine to do 10 courts for a high court, just 10 million shillings.
Yes.
So maybe with
That's
another,
pocket change
yeah,
for
it's 10
government.
million shillings,
Yes.
and just maybe another 10 million for operationalization, you know, the staffing, the furniture, things like that. That means with 20 million, you can do a high court in every constituency.
Yes.
Surely, Fred, if you take 20 million and maybe 20 million shillings times 300 constituencies, it's just about 6 billion shillings, and you have high court in every constituency. And with that, then you are able to talk of staffing. That is the registrar and the administration that is needed for that area. So, Fred, they can be redistributed to such structures so that now they become functioning. But this president missed out on that,
Yes.
and has spent most of his times on sideshows. And now he finds himself in a situation where he's a
Time is
victim
almost
of
up.
time is up. He's a victim of a heavy political propaganda. You can see the media now is completely away from him. You can see on behalf of the church, not
Yes.
to speak of the Gen Z and
Yes.
the public servants themselves. They can't wait for us to remove the housing levy fund off their payslips, which is a political promise that we are
As
running
in,
with.
For a person, you know, yesterday we were having conversation
Yes.
with one of the analysts.
Yeah.
And he said, it is one of the biggest he should have tolerated Gachagua until the term was done.
Yes.
And then probably executed now when he has no stakes whatsoever, kick him out. The
Yes.
same way, you know, President tolerated him but never kicked him out.
Absolutely.
But right now, he has a critical mass that is so passionate
Yeah.
that, and he seems to have developed the gift of gab,
Yeah.
in the sense that now he has the what they say, answers to President Ruto that have no comebacks, like the young people say.
Yeah.
He just says it and you're wondering, wow.
Yeah. So the president finds himself in a very tough situation because he is a victim of heavy propaganda because of the many forces that are now against him, and they are very wide. We've listed them for a very long time. But now there is also nothing to show for it. You understand?
Yes.
Yeah, it would have been, Fred, if I ever get a chance to work in public service, and particularly in an executive position where I have a budget, Fred, I'm telling you that you pick one thing and you run away with, just like what I was trying to tell the CS for tourism. A wonderful lady called Rebecca Miano. I was telling her that, you see, in a function, I was telling her that, you see, madam, in this ministry is a service ministry, and Kenyans might struggle to quantify what you've done, because not everybody is interested. Sometimes people want to see that it is Fred who built the SGR.
Yes.
You know, they want to see something. So I told him that, you know, we have KICC, which needs to be restructured to become a convention center, so that it performs beyond what it is doing now, because KICC is largely an office structure, which shouldn't be the case, because most of the individuals that were serving there, including MPs, there's now a full-blown bunge towers that was built to actually accommodate every single MP and every senator, to restructure that. But then there are two very important assets in town, the Hilton Plaza, which was originally owned by it was a partnership. Hilton was just leasing, the Hilton Hotel were leasing, but the building is owned by government, and I think one of the other sub-owners there. So government owns around 40%. Same to the Intercontinental Hotel. Those three structures, in addition to the Bomas of Kenya, which incidentally happens to be the Ministry of Culture, but is actually a convention center. You just work on those four.
Turn them completely
so that when people just walk around, they say, this is Rebecca Mia. You just pick one thing and run with it. But
that's the same thing a gentleman called Dindi Nyoro has done in Kiharu. And now he was a topic of discussion in Parliament, with members of Parliament saying, oh, this guy stole money, and now even MPs are going to benchmark in his constituency. It's just something else.
And that's why I'm not shocked when you see a headline like this, they're saying, king of absurd promises. You know, they're saying our dear president is the king of absurd promises, most of whom don't appear realistic. I think the president, William Ruto, he's working with an assumption that from where I sit, is that probably he can be able to buy this election, but the population that is dealing with is completely different.
It's a completely different crop of people.
It's a completely different crop of people because of the amount of information that they're able to consume. And the only time, I can't wait, I've said it off air and I'm saying it again, I can't wait for the by-elections, because that's the first time we'll be testing the voters. And I'm telling you, a lot of people are waiting for that moment when they'll be told IBC is in place. You know, that is the one thing that has told the excitement. And people are sort of laid back and waiting. But the day we have an IBC, Fred, you will begin to see the real political tones that are around the country. And I think that vote, because there will be by-elections in almost 14 constituencies. You know, 4 constituencies which are constituency elections, but also the wards are actually in constituencies, you understand? So it could be a by-election, for example, in our county in Huisero, there's an MCA we lost, unfortunately, was stabbed to death. So that ward will have a by-election, but still be handled within that constituency.
And they're still going to have the MPs by-election.
Exactly. So the MP by-election also in a different constituency. So 14 constituencies will be going to election, which is a very good sample. And it's very wide, because we have another by-election in Tana River. Then, you know, we lost an MP in Mandera. Then in Kirinyaga here, we lost an MC, I think, in Nyandaro as well. We have 1 or 2 by-elections, I think, in that area. Then we have in Kisii, we have in Western, we have a by-election in Nyanza. So the sample spread is very wide. You can be able to begin to
tell. So this will be able to tell people exactly the feel of the people towards the president.
Across the region, across different regions. And I think this president is fully aware of that. That is why he's back on top of vehicles instead of being in an office working.
This is obviously going to be a difficult thing for him. Talk about Ndindi Nyoro.
Absolutely. Ndindi Nyoro.
He was Gachagwa's camp, or perceived camp, were all dethroned from a House parliamentary committees. And now Ndindi Nyoro being the or the chief.
You cannot rule out the fact that Ndindi Nyoro as a person, and look at his performance in the constituency, that he's done well. He's a young man. Me and Ndindi Nyoro, we're actually the same age.
Yes.
And so he's one of those young and aspirational leaders that would pretty much play a role in the years to come, and has largely been a very close ally of the president, that even others were doubting if he's truly against the president. You understand?
Because when you mention ally, I remember isn't he the one who was being arrested during Uhuru's time?
Oh, yes, at that time, but he's an ally of President William Ruto. Because
even then, he was an ally of Ruto and was being persecuted for being an ally of Ruto.
Absolutely, but you see, that's why they defeated that government.
Yes, yes.
But now they formed government, and he was even very close. You would see him driving with the president at a personal, in his personal farm and things like that. So you could even raise issues and question whether or not he's really part ways with the president politically. But him being a politician, this is probably, in as far as strategy is concerned, it places him in good standing with majority of the voters, because then he's seen, he has not openly associated with Rigathi Gachagua, but then by virtue of him being eliminated, they've just made him given him a political lifeline, because majority of the others are going to exit the scene very soon. Yes. And so for him, I think this gives him a political lifeline for him to go back and reorganize himself, and could be very strong, probably even run for governor of Murang'a. And even though my very good friend, Governor Kang'ata, very humble guy, very humble guy, you can hardly tell. You know, I followed the story of Irungu Kang'ata from when he was a student leader and how he was elected a councillor, and all the way to him becoming governor, because then he became MP and then senator. He's been everything that you can be.
And the strangest thing, he's never lost an election.
He's never lost an election, no resources. Just, you know, he's never a moneyed resources, just a likable guy.
Yes.
And so I was asking a friend of mine called Dan Mwathi, comes from Kangema. I was asking him, how has this Irungu Kang'ata been able to survive some heavy, you know, the money men of Murang'a who had different plans, because they were backing the Senator Kembi Gitura, and majority of them wanted him to be governor. But there's a way that Irungu Kang'ata
he's a strange character.
He's been able to do that. And they were telling me that is because he appears harmless most times. And so particularly the women, the mothers and the women in Murang'a, they say, let's just vote for our son. He's much available. He's not a threat to us. And somehow he makes it. You remember him contributing 30,000 in Harambee, and President William Ruto telling him, he's here governor, 40,000 here governor. You know, and obviously depending with how he does his mathematics, Ndindi Nyoro will be an issue. And if Ndindi Nyoro survives and becomes an elected politician in the next election, whether he chooses to run for just for his member of, re-election for his seat, or goes for governor and actually survive, he could be a major player in the future elections.
Do you see him starting to campaign against?
That is the decision he has to make, and he has to make early, because of the kind of opponent he's going to have in the mountain.
True.
You know, Gachagua is been told the king of emotional, an emotional mobilizer.
Yes.
And is likely to really run. And President William Ruto has made it easy. Fred, I've told you, the reason why President William Ruto ran very quickly to Nyanza is because that was the easiest group to sell an anti-Rigathi Gachagua and anti-Kikuyu campaign. You understand?
Yes.
It's the easiest to do because of the history they've had over the years with Kikuyu presidents. It has been perceived as a community that has been tormented for very many years. Just like what they're doing with the Somalis. You know, the issue of immigration and mistreatment. It has been for very many years. So this issue of IDs and removal of vetting is a very emotive issue.
Yes.
There are very many Somalis that have been felt for many years that have been put through a very tough process to even be able just to become a citizen. Never mind, some of them are genuine Kenyans who've been born here and grew up here, went to the local schools. But somebody is told, enda leta kitambulisho ya babu yako. Yes. Now, you know, babu yako is 150 years from today. Because my grandfather, the late Nathan Kakai Ndunde, was born in 1928. His father, who was Ndunde, was born in 1896. His father now whom I was named after, he was called Soika Oyuka, born in 1860s there, was from around Kakamega town there, who is what he would be the grandfather of my grandfather. There's no ID for him. Now it is saying go bring your ID. It's been a tough process for him, and President William Ruto realizes that's a very easy and emotive group to touch. That's why those are the two areas he's trying to get the 3 million votes to be able to survive. And with that in mind, it also gives Rigathi Gachagua an opportunity to create a siege mentality that they want to chop us off. And so anybody that goes against that 12 Fed might not be able to survive. So he has to make that decision early before Rigathi Gachagua formally declares his party or who is endorsing, because then that becomes the Mulima party. Just like I was told, the AUC candidate for Djibouti was the Mulima candidate. And some people were telling me, they're celebrating, Fred, that they're even now much more happy that nowadays the Mulima candidate, they're happy that the Mulima candidate, Mohamed Yusuf, who's the current chair of the ASU, has completely refused the business of handshake. That is the only handshake that has been Raila Odinga, has eluded Raila Odinga, that every week Raila Odinga is going to Addis to ask for handshake. But Mohamed Yusuf has said, ataki upuzi. Ataki upuzi kabisa. Ukipoteza, you go home. And so the Mulima candidate is doing well at the UC. And Ndindi Nyoro must be careful, because that wave, especially if it becomes very formal as it is now, because now the mountain has been profiled as now the lead opposition group. Everybody is now on the mountain, Fred. And it's unfortunate because it might turn out ethnic, and then we get back to what we were in 2007.
True. Well, we got to bring down the curtains on this show, George. I'm really grateful that you came through.
Yes.
And let's see how this is going to play out.
Yeah.
In terms of, how the president is going to behave, how the prime minister is going to behave, how Rigathi Gachagua is going to behave, because some of the statements he's been making are scary statements. We see how all these guys are going to, the policies they are going to implement.
Yes. So
that the lives of the people can be changed.
Thanks.
Well, with that, we got to bring down the curtains on the show, as I said. Remember, at around 11:30, you have Daughters of the Kingdom discussing matters kingdom. Until then, do have yourself a lovely morning.